What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Heavy Live with Scoop B. I am Brandon Scoop Robinson, senior writer at Heavy.com. It's always a party when we've got familiar faces. I think you know who this guy is. Tiki Barber, host at CBS Sports Radio, a published author. And I learned something new today. You, as an actor, were on the reboot of Knight Rider.
Yes, that's right. I haven't heard that in a long time, Scoop.
So, first of all, welcome to the show, Tiki.
I appreciate you, Scoop, man. Blessings to you and to everyone out there. Happy holidays and be safe, obviously. But yeah, Knight Rider. I played Sergeant Barber. I was caught up in a underground fighting ring, and I ended up dying. I spent half of my scene just dead, laying on the table.
Tiki, that is the most literally maybe 10, 15 minutes before this interview, just finishing up questions and stuff I have for you. I'm like, so I know this wasn't like David Hasselhoff Knight Rider, but
no,
it's still Knight Rider.
Yes, it was. It was the reboot. I think it only lasted for a season, maybe two. But I remember getting that call. I was at the end of my playing career. And they were like, "Hey, would you like to do an episode of Knight Rider?" I'm like, "You mean like Knight Rider with the car?" And like, when I was a kid, I was like, "Hell yeah, I want to be on that." And so I went out there. I was only out for about 2 days, and they ran me through my lines and gave me my character and taught me some fight scenes because I get caught up in this fight match, this underground cage match, and get choked out, and they find me dead. And the mystery is, how did Sergeant Barber end up dead? And they find out it was because of this underground fight thing. So it was kind of cool, man. It was fun. I had a good time.
Random question: did you know that the voice of Kit is Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World?
Get out of here!
That's Mr.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I had no idea. I watched that show when I was 12 years old or something. It was a long time ago. But I never even made that connection. So you learn something new every day, Scoop. Thank you, brother.
Every question.
What's up?
How slept on is your twin brother, Ronde Barber?
Very. And you know why? And it's unfortunate too, because it's partly my fault. We being identical twins, we were always synonymous with each other, even when we were in high school and college. And once we got to the National Football League, it was like, yeah, Ronde's great, but his twin brother's up in New York, and his twin brother's doing radio shows and on TV, and just got this national profile while he's down there in Tampa being great, but nobody's paying attention because of what I was doing. But he played 16 years, Scoop, 16 years in one spot, and won a championship at a place where, the Bucs were historically just brutal for a franchise. And then they brought in Tony Dungy to be their head coach, one of the first black head coaches in the NFL. And he turned the program around. Now, they moved on from him right before they won a championship. And John Gruden came in and won that championship. But it was all with Tony Dungy's players. And Ronde was one of them, Hall of Fame caliber. So I think the other thing is why he gets slept on is, unlike me, he shies away from the spotlight. Like he's not looking for it. But being in New York, you can't help it. You know what I mean? So I think it's partly his personality, partly because he's in Tampa, which is a slower town, and the other side of it is people just don't appreciate how good he was when and with everything that he was asked to do down in Tampa.
In sports, I know you've seen Horace Grant, Harvey Grant. You look at the Morris twins in basketball. You look at the Logan twins. Is there any type of organization for twins in sports?
There isn't, but maybe I should start one. That's a good idea. The McCourtys, Devin and Jason McCourty, who are still currently playing with the New England Patriots, they're probably the most famous of the twins because they do so much with sickle cell and a bunch of the camps that they do in their off season, and they're Super Bowl champions.
Right.
And so it helps that they have this high profile from being on, really the greatest dynasty that we've seen in the NFL in decades. And so there should be an organization, because you think about how rare that is, Scoop. It's hard for one person, but for two brothers and then two twins to make it to the professional ranks, it's rare. And there's not a whole bunch of us. But those that have done it, we're kind of this small little community. We actually should get together and do something. That's a good idea, bro.
Yeah, and I want 10%. But what I say is this: like, the reason why I bring that up is because when you look at the Morris twins,
yes,
time and I believe Phoenix as well, there's a level of connectivity that they have. Is that common for twins in general? How different, how similar is that? What do you think?
Yeah, no. So here's the thing, Markeith and Marcus, they were both in LA last year. One was with the Clippers, one was with the Lakers. But you grow up basically doing the same thing. For me and Ronde, we were in the same room, like literally until we were 20 years old because we went to college together. And I think the same thing for a lot of these others. I know the Lopez's went to school together, and I don't know if the Morrises did. I'm pretty sure they did as well. So half of your life, you are literally with the same guy doing everything at the same time. But then at some point, you kind of have to grow up, for us, me and Ronde, was when we hit 22 years old. He got drafted to Tampa, which is a completely different lifestyle than living in New York. And I didn't live in Jersey. I lived in New York at the time. I'm in Jersey now. But when I was playing, I was a New Yorker, and he was a Tampa, golfer, and I'm doing, Broadway and, business meetings and all these other types of things. He's chilling, going on vacations. And so over time, I think you just you don't grow apart, but you just become different, right? It's the whole nature versus nurture debate that's always out there. And twins are good studies for this. Because if you stay on the same path, you'll probably be very similar. But when you start walking different paths, you get nurtured into different interests and different ideas. You make different types of relationships. And so, there are a ton of similarities. And Ronde and I have the same cadence. Like, we talk the same, and we have the same, like tics, like personalities. Like, we stand the same way if we're just chilling, hanging on a wall or something. Yeah. But our interests are very, very different because I came to New York and he went to Tampa. I mean, he's like a 3. He's like a 3 or 4 golf handicapper. I'm like a 23. You know what I mean? So it just depends on what you fall into when you get older.
You're the personality. He's the face, but he's got the Super Bowl ring and the golf swing.
That's right, and 6 more years of game checks.
About that. Our current 2 cornerbacks. Should they be in the Hall of Fame?
It depends, and I think in the old systems of the NFL, a cover 2 corner they call it the system guy, right? You just sit in the system. You got to take the guy that goes to the flat. There's nobody that comes in the flat. You can lag back and basically double team that outside wide receiver, and you can end up getting a bunch of interceptions. You know what I mean? So it's like the system allowed you to get interceptions. Yeah. But I think that in Ronde's case in particular, the cover 2 scheme that Monty Kiffin, their defensive coordinator at the time, employed was about pressing quarterbacks into making mistakes. And so while Ronde was a cover 2 corner, he also played inside as a linebacker. He also got asked to cover the tight end at times. And so he's running down the middle of the field with guys that outweigh him by 50 pounds. He's asked to blitz. That's why he's got 40 or 30 something sacks in his career. He made 100 tackles a season every year for the first 12 years of his career. And so yes, in I guess the big picture, the big bubble of cover 2, it's a system, and it probably the system helps you. But when you get into the minutia, like the details of what some of these guys are asked to do, in particular Ronde, who I think mastered the slot corner position and changed it and revolutionized it in the NFL, those type of guys in the Hall of Fame. And I think Ronde certainly.
Tiki, 2-part question.
Go ahead.
All right. So, number 1, how difficult was it for you splitting touches with Ronde?
Yeah.
And was it difficult being viewed as a change of pace back initially?
Yeah. Early on, I didn't mind it at all because I wasn't good. I mean, at the end of my career, I was really good. I was rushing for 1,600 yards every season. But early in my career, I was just trying to stay on the team, man. It was like, dude, you want me to return punts? Yeah, I got that. Let me do that. You want me to be the third down back? Yeah, let me do that too, right? Like whatever you need me to return kickoffs or burn down, whatever you need me to do, have me do. So in 2000, when we drafted Ronde, who was, I mean, he was the man. He's the Heisman Trophy, one of the greatest running backs in the history of college football. Not just Wisconsin, but college football. He's one of the greatest. And we drafted him. And if he hadn't been such a cool, chill dude, like, and I don't know if you ever met Ron or had a conversation, he is so chill. And it made it easy for us to compete against each other. It was like, all right, bro, go ahead. You got this. All right, bro, I got this. And then Sean Payton changed our offense. So he made it where we had plays that were specific for me, and he called them lightning plays. And then there were plays that were specific for Ron, and he called them thunder plays, which is why we had this moniker, you know, back then called Thunder and Lightning. We tried to like market it, make T-shirts and stuff, and the NFL was like, no, hell no, y'all ain't doing that. and so like, but we embraced it. Like we embraced our dual roles, and I knew that I had a function, and he knew that he had a function, and in fact, it really worked. Right, that first year, I rushed for 1,000 yards. It was my first career season rushing for 1,000 yards, and Ron rushed for like 800 yards. So people look at Ron like, oh, he didn't have a good. Like, actually, he did pretty well. The problem is, I started to get really good. Like the challenge of having someone come take my job, I think propelled me to become better. And that next couple of years, I really came into my own, and Ron became the situational guy, and I became the starter. So to answer your question directly, was it hard to be the situational guy? No, it was easy, but becoming that situational guy forced me to get better. And ultimately I became the star runner for the team. But yeah, so sometimes people look at that as like this challenge and man, what am I going to do? They don't want me. I'm expendable at this point, but it all depends how you accept that challenge, you know? And I accepted it and my career took off from there.
Hardest hit that you ever got?
Oh man, this is an easy one. And I only know it because I saw it, meaning on tape. They showed it to me on tape. So my rookie season, we're playing the St. Louis Rams. They're still in St. Louis. We're playing the St. Louis Rams, and we're running a stretch run out to the right side. And I was known to be a cutback runner. So I'd stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch, and then I'd put my foot in the ground and cut back. And so I'm running this stretch. I'm like, dude, I see that cutback, but I'm gonna hold it just for a second. I'm gonna keep a couple more steps, and then I cut back without looking. And Toby Wright, who was the safety for the Rams, came from. I only know this because I saw it on tape. He came from about 15 yards deep. He knew I was cutting back, and he was beelining to this cutback hole. And I cut back without looking, and he drilled me right in my temple. And I was out. Was unconscious. Only time in my career that I've been fully unconscious on a field. And I laid down there for, 3 or 4 minutes. I ended up getting up and going to the sideline. And back then they let you come back in if you got concussed. So I tried to come back in like 3 plays later. And Dave Brown was our quarterback. He calls the play. And I remember, I can remember this part. I remember looking at him like, what do I do on this play? And he calls a timeout and was like, get out of here. You got to go to the sideline. So that was my hardest hit, and it was my rookie season. And then from that point on, I never cut back without looking.
It's interesting you bring that up because from a basketball perspective, I remember when Karis LeVert hurt himself.
Yeah.
When he came back, I remember sitting down with him after a game last season or the season before last and said,
yep.
When you get back on the court, do you like think before you plant your feet? Is it like a process of? He was like. First, when you come on, you're it's like teaching yourself how to walk. It's one thing when you're in practice. It's another thing, when you're in a game time situation.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So, after that hit, how many games did it take you to kind of like? Oh man,
a lot. It took me probably 4 or 5 weeks before I felt comfortable doing that. From that point on, I was always like, I'm just gonna go where the play is supposed to go. Like I know I'm protected if I'm heading where the play is supposed to go. And so it took me a long time. And the only way I really overcame it was probably, so by the way, that happened my rookie season.
Right.
And then I stopped being an every down back. So for like 3 years, I wasn't the guy. I didn't have those many opportunities. But then when I got older, and this is about the time Ronde got drafted that we were just talking about, I had learned how to study defenses and learned how to study players, like study their tendencies and know what they wanted to do. So Toby Wright, who I just mentioned, I mean, he knocked himself out of the league. Like he himself had so many concussions that he couldn't play the game anymore. And so you learn those guys. It's like, know where Brian Dawkins is on the field at all times. Know where John Lynch is on the field at all times. So from that point on, I would get into the backfield and I knew I had to play. I'm like, all right, let me see where the safety is. Is he playing back? Is he in a zone? Or is he sneaking up towards the line of scrimmage? And if he's sneaking up to the line of scrimmage, I know I don't have any cutbacks. If he's backing up, I'm like, all right, I might be able to have a cutback on. So it was just like these little check marks, and they happen in microseconds. Like you're not thinking about them consciously. You just kind of know. It's like, all right, he's backing up. I can't cut back. All right, he's coming up. Like, all right, we got to. So it's learning how to study that helped me become the player that I was as I got a little bit older in my career.
Tell me something. Jamal Adams.
Yeah.
His season of going to Seattle.
Yeah.
More specifically, after leaving the Jets.
Yep. No. Let's get it right. He forced his way out of the Jets.
It was James Harden before James Harden.
That's right. That's exactly right. Get me the hell out.
How do you feel about that?
I remember we talked about this at the time because my partner on my radio show, Brandon Tierney, is a big Jets fan, and like he looked at it one way. He looked at it as, great job by the Jets of getting some first round assets for a guy who was disgruntled. He was never going to be the right fit for us. Good job, New York Jets. I looked at it as, especially because, a few weeks later, Le'Veon Bell basically did the same thing. He was like, I want out of here. You guys don't, I don't want to feel no love from you guys. I don't want to be here anymore. Trade me. They couldn't find a trade partner, so they ended up just cutting him. And now he's on the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Which is in a great, asset for the Chiefs. So you essentially have two great players. Le'Veon Bell was, all pro for a long time when he was in Pittsburgh. Jamal Adams is one of the best box safeties in the National Football League. He sacks, he tackles, he gets he disrupts everything that's going on from a defensive perspective. And both of those guys forced their way out of the Jets, and they allowed it to happen. Yes, they got some assets back, right? But that's not going to pay off for at least 2 or 3 years. Now, maybe that coincides with them getting right. Who knows? But like the fact that you're forcing your way out of an organization and celebrating that just strikes me as like odd. So I think it was great for Jamal because he didn't want to be there, and it was going to be toxic. But as good as it feels from a Jets fan perspective, I think from a Jet evaluation perspective, it's a little bit troubling. The stars of the NFL don't want to be there, and then when they don't want to be there, you let them force their way out. That's the one thing that kind of rubs me a little bit wrong. Now, if they capitalize 3 years down the line, then great. But I mean, that's not a guarantee. We know that. I mean, who knows if the coach is still going to be there at that point?
From a divisional rival standpoint or opinion, do you feel for Deshaun Jackson, who had a series of leg injuries the last couple of seasons?
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, D-Jax, he was a stud, back for a long time, and I think he's a victim of a guy who just loves the game so much and doesn't see himself doing anything else, right? And D-Jax, when he was previously in Philly, and then he left. And then he came back, and it was like, man, they got a guy they can trust, and they can, yes, he had a bad breakup, so to speak, but now that he's back, we own him again, and it's just going to be great. But what happens with age in any sport, but in particular the NFL, because it's so atrocious, right? You just get the crap beat out of you. You start to break down at some point, and I feel like he's limping to the finish, and I hate to see that for a guy who was, one of the icons, about a decade ago.
Does Jerry Jones remind you of James Dolan, the way they both run their organization?
That's interesting. I'm going to say no. And the reason is no, is because at least Jerry tells you what the hell is going on in his mind. Gotcha. James Dolan, you're kind of like, bro, what are you thinking about? Like, just tell me, what's your plan? You have any idea? Like, why you hire Phil Jackson? He's never done this before, and pay him a grip, right? Why are you going to do that? Jerry Jones will tell you, well, I'm doing this because I want to win the championship, and I think it's going to work, and if it doesn't work, then it's on me. Like, at least with Jerry Jones, like, he's very open, and he's a great marketer, and he's It's why they can still claim that the Cowboys are America's team, because you either love, like, it's binary with the Cowboys. You either love them or you hate them. And I think it's actually a good space to be in professional sports, because people are aware of your successes and your failures, but at least they're talking about you. You know what I mean? It's like that whole, no news is bad news, even if it's negative. The Cowboys have had a lot of negative news over the last few years, but they're always relevant. Whereas the Knicks, it's been a lot of negative news. I mean, some sprinkled in some good things that happen here or there, but it feels like they're irrelevant, right? And so Jerry Jones has done a good job of, despite the Cowboys not having success, keeping them relevant. Whereas the Knicks, whether they have had success or not, they're irrelevant. So I think Jerry's done a much better job. So I can't say that they're the same.
Is Tom Brady just hanging on at this point in his career?
I think Tom Brady, Scoop, is in a spot that a lot of people go through when they're 24 or 5 years old. That is, I'm at a new spot and I need to learn a new offense. I need to find exactly what my role is. And it's happening in a pandemic with a coach and Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich, his offensive coordinator, who is like the antithesis of what they did in New England. We're throwing the ball downfield. I don't care if your arm's a little bit rubbery at this point. We got Mike Evans. We got, Gronk is still there. We got now Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin. We got guys to stretch the field. We're throwing the ball downfield, so you better figure out how to do it. And by the way, he did this without an off season, right? Without a basic real training camp and a disrupted early part of the regular season. So I feel like he's still finding himself, to be honest with you. He's 43 years old. He's the GOAT, obviously. But I think he's still finding himself, and they're trying to identify what their identity is in Tampa. It's why we see some of these games where they're like, they blew out the Green Bay Packers. And then you turn around and they get the floor wiped with themselves against the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's like there's a lot of ups and downs. Like, it's very volatile. And I think a lot of that's just because he's still learning what this offense is going to be with him at the helm.
Is Donovan McNabb a Hall of Famer?
I think he is. Donovan had so much success, and yes, it didn't culminate in a championship. When you think about, the top 2 or 3 greatest quarterbacks in Philadelphia Eagles history, Donovan is there. The problem with Donovan, it's not dissimilar to the problem with me. Like, you create this narrative about somebody that's kind of, it's ignorant of the statistics and ignorant of the moment. Like, not this moment now, not 5 or 6 or 8 years removed, but the moment then, when Donovan was one of the best and most feared quarterbacks in the National Football League, not for like a year or two, but for like 5 or 6 years. And, he was great. He wasn't the greatest at the time, and that's mainly because of the peers. I mean, he was playing with like Peyton Manning and Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers. Like, the peers in his era were heavyweights. But I do think he's a Hall of Famer. It's just going to be really hard for him to get in because the narrative is constructed against him, and it's not fair. But he's an all-time great in Philadelphia, and that carries a lot of weight.
What's the worst name that you've ever been called in Philadelphia?
Dude, the worst thing that ever happened that someone called it, because right when I had my baby, my oldest is 18 now, which is crazy. Wow. So this was back in 2002 or so. Yeah, 2002 or 3. So AJ was born until 2002, and Chase, and my youngest son, I have 4 more after that, 4 girls after that, was born in 2004. And so, and around 2003, I remember being down there, and we were having an off year that year, and Coach Fossil ended up getting fired at the end of that season. I remember being down in Philly, and these guys were right on the edge. And I used to let my family go to these games, by the way, in Philly, and it stopped after this. They were screaming at me that I fumbled so much that when I got home, I dropped my baby on his head, and he's gonna be I can't even use the words, but he's gonna be slow because I dropped him so much. By the way, that 18-year-old is now committed to go to Princeton. He's one of the great wide receivers up in Connecticut. Him and his brother played at Greenwich High, and they won a state championship a couple years ago. But he turned out to be really smart and a pretty good football player as well.
Hated to love it. The underdog's on top. I like it.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Do you think that Beast Mode returns to Seattle this season?
Dude, can you imagine? I don't think so. I feel like he's been sitting for too long. I haven't seen him. I know he did that thing with Peyton Manning at least it aired a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if there's one person that could do it, it would be him. But I don't see it happening. They have a really good runner in Chris Carson, who I really like, and he's been banged up a lot this season. And if he gets right, and this offense can run the ball again effectively, talking about the Seattle offense, then they're going to be a threat. Right? And it's the one interesting thing about the NFC, Scoop. It's like, who stands out? I know the Green Bay Packers are currently the number 1 seed, but they got blown out by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the number 6 seed. Is it the New Orleans Saints, who Drew Brees has been banged up, and Taysom Hill, while he's been good and he's won some games, he's leading the league in fumbles since he took over as the starting quarterback for the Saints. So they're the number 2 seed. So you trust them? They just lost to the Eagles, right? And then you throw in the Rams. The Rams look great until Jared Goff turns the ball over, 4 times in a game, and they can lose to anybody at that point. So it's like a crapshoot. It's like a toss-up, which makes the playoffs in the NFC. It's going to be really compelling. But it also, because this is that new year, remember they added that extra playoff team, Scoop. So there's only one bye week. There's like one team gets the bye week. That's it. So whoever has the number 1 seed, it's like critical to have the number 1 seed. Otherwise, you're playing right into the wild card round against any team from, the Saints right now to, I think, the Cardinals, who are the current 7th seed, who could beat you on any given day, right? And so it makes for a fantastic postseason any given Sunday. Because even I think the 2 seed the Cardinals could beat the Saints. You know what I mean? The Buccaneers could beat whoever, I forget who is in the 3rd slot right now. But it's like it's a toss up, right? And that makes it really interesting, especially because they added that extra playoff spot.
You appeared on my podcast, Scoopy Radio, over the summer, and you talked about how you felt that a certain Seattle Seahawks quarterback is very, very underrated.
Yes, he is.
The Seahawks play a Washington football team. I'm still getting used to saying Washington football team.
I know, it's hard, man. I grew up a Redskins fan, so I'm like, the Washington football team. It's just stuck in my head. So, but I'm getting close.
Yeah. What do you think about that matchup this weekend?
So you obviously know the Giants, my former team, beat the Seahawks last weekend, or 2 weekends ago. The reason they were able to do it is because their defensive front, their front 4, put a lot of pressure and made Russell Wilson look down. Like, so instead of looking up out the field, I say, this guy's coming open. Instead of looking downfield, he was constantly looking at the front 4 of the New York Giants and all the pressure they was able to get on him. And that's how you make Russell Wilson average. When you allow him to feel pressured and uncomfortable in the pocket, then there's a chance that you can beat them and disrupt him and how good he is. Now, the one thing the Giants or one thing the Washington football team has over the New York Giants is their front 4 might be the best in football. Whether it's Chase Young, who was just drafted number 1. By the way, all 4 of those guys on the defensive front, Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Deron Payne, and Jonathan Allen, they're all first-round draft picks. So their front defensive 4 are all first-round draft picks each in subsequent years. So 20, 19, 18, 17, first-round draft picks. And then you throw Ryan Kerrigan, who was a 2012 or so first-round draft pick, as a situational guy. They got guys that can get after you. And so if there's a team in the NFL that's going to be a pain in the ass for Russell Wilson, it's going to be the Washington football team. So I think they have a good chance of beating them. And let's not forget, Ron Rivera, who is the new head coach at Washington, came in there and it was we got to change our culture. We got to change our attitude. We got to risk. We got to trust each other. It's why they went for 2 against the Giants the first time they played, and they ended up losing that game by a point, 20 to 19. And so, but this mentality has I think taken over the Washington football team. It's why Ron is such a great coach. Coach Rivera is such a great coach, and they've won 3 games in a row or 4 games in a row, whatever it is. They're 6 and 7 right now, and and sit in the top of the NFC East. I think they could beat anybody. Look, they won last weekend. They didn't even score an offensive touchdown, right? It just tells you how dominant their defense can be. I like Washington. I'm not personally, because I'm a Giants fan, and my loyalties changed when the paycheck started coming from the Meadowlands, as opposed to being a Southwestern Virginia boy. But I like where Washington is headed. I like where the culture has started to shift. We talked about on the field with Ron Rivera. They hired a young black, great former McKinsey executive, Jason Wright, to be their new president, and he's changing things from the top down. I mean, football, we focus on what happens on the field, but success happens from the top down. Yep. It's why the Steelers are always as good as they are. It's why the Seahawks are always as good as they are. It's why the Giants historically have been that way. The top down is how you win in in the National Football League, and they're starting to get it right in Washington. Finally, it's been a long time, but they're finally starting to get it right again.
You're rocking a Virginia Cavaliers hoodie, and I'm curious.
Wow.
Here you go. Cam Chancellor and Kenny Easley. Are there similarities between the two?
That's an interesting question. Kenny Easley's old school, man. Like we had him on our show. I think it was like 5 or 6 months ago, and I didn't realize how impactful of a player he was. Because when I was watching him, I was young and just kind of like just watching the game. But Cam Chancellor was the same way, and it was this new era of big, physically dominant secondary players,
right?
And and so when that came into the league, it challenged speed, because it used to be, hey, speed, but physicality ends up winning, I think, in football. And we saw this in the Super Bowl. What year was it? It was in New York. It was the Seahawks Super Bowl. Seahawks against the Denver Broncos. I can't remember which one it was or what year it was. Maybe it was 2014 to 15. But I remember that game, and obviously everybody remembers the early safety and things that happened in that game. But it's Peyton Manning's first series. He completed after the fumble. He completed 3 passes, right? 3 completions for Peyton Manning. He got 9 yards. 3 passes for 9 yards. And I remember saying, this is going to be a long day for Denver, because they got safeties and corners who are going to come up and knock the crap out of it. They'll let you complete passes, but you're catching and getting tackled right there. So I think there are a lot of similarities in their games because of the physicality that they brought to a position that historically wasn't that physical.
Steve Nash is a first-year head coach with the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, man. That's going to be fun.
Advice for
him? My advice for Steve, and I've never been a head coach, but I've had some good ones. You got to be authentic in who you are. And he's got a challenge because of his roster. And I'm talking obviously specifically about Kyrie Irving. Kyrie has a very unique personality. And I'm not saying this in a bad way, because I actually enjoy having a conversation with him. I've met him a couple of times, and the conversations they're deep, but they're real. You got to take time to understand your player. It can't be all strokes for all guys. It's different strokes for different folks. You know what I mean? And for Coach Nash, who's never had to do this, he's never had to manage different personalities. The easiest way to do it is to just be yourself. Don't try to be fake. Don't come in and be hard or be, whatever. You got to be yourself and develop a relationship, because superstars run the NBA. And as much as people get frustrated with Kyrie, he's still a superstar. Kevin Durant, obviously coming off his injury, he's a superstar. They need cohesion, and the only way it's going to start with Coach Nash. So cohesion is key. Now he's also very lucky, because Mike D'Antoni is an assistant, what we like to call his offensive coordinator, and Jacques Vaughn, who they held on to, is kind of like their defensive coordinator. So they have this unique makeup of coaches. Jacques was obviously the interim head coach for a while, and D'Antoni is a longtime head coach. He has resources to draw off of, but at its core, you got to be the relationship guy, especially with superstars on your squad.
Do you think that they played well against the Washington Wizards without Russell Westbrook?
Yeah.
They've been on Instagram Live. They've had conversations, and but I guess my question for you is, do you think when the actual NBA season starts, there will be a gelling period for Kyrie and KD?
Yeah, I think, you know what, Scoop, I think it's going to be that way for everybody. This is a weird season, right? Because, the postseason, I feel like it ended yesterday. You know what I mean? I feel like it ended like a weekend ago.
Today.
Yeah, right? But I think there's certainly a acclimation period that's going to be, it could be a little rough, right? Because we remember what KD was really good at when he was in Golden State. Right. Less so when he was in Oklahoma City, because that was a lot of ice ball. I mean, he'd get a rebound or he'd take the inbound pass. He'd just come all the way up the court, find his, run right to his spot while dribbling and take the shot. Right? It was ISO. But in Golden State, it was movement. It was, you're running around screens, you're back picking, you're doing all these different things to find, the open guy. Like the right shot was always taken. Now, it often included a lot of KD, because once KD was on his spot, it was the right shot, regardless who was guarding him. And I think in Houston, in Brooklyn now, with Mike D'Antoni coming from Houston, who has this more free flowing, right? If you can take a high percentage, layup or a 3-pointer, then take it. Like, there's no such thing as a bad 3-point shot. They're going to have some troubles, like pulling KD back to what he used to be, and Kyrie not being, a selfish point guard, which is hard. Remember this? Remember when he was in, Kyrie was in Cleveland, and LeBron James came back to Cleveland, right? There was a game, and I think it was a preseason game, and if it wasn't a preseason game, it was early in the season, that first year where LeBron came back, and Kyrie took 20 shots and finished the game with 0 assists. 0. He's a point guard. 0 assists. And it became public. LeBron was like, Kyrie, you will never finish a game again with 0 assists, right? It is your job to facilitate for everyone else. You have a ton of skill. You create. You suck defenders to you. Kick it out to somebody who's open. And you trust your teammates. And so, this trust ratio or quotient, whatever you want to call it, whatever word you want to use, is something that's going to take some time. I think with this a new offense and a new superstar teammate in KD, but it's going to be fun. I mean, they're going to be one of the funnest teams, and plus they held on to my boy from Virginia, Joe Harris, the sharpshooter from Virginia. They held on to. I like their squad, but they got a lot of melding and growing together to do.
And Joe Harris got the bag.
Yes, good for him. See, you don't just go to Virginia and go work on Wall Street. You can go to the pros and get paid too.
Couple more questions.
All right, bro.
Vince Carter retired after 22 seasons. Just you,
dude. He is. I was in Atlanta 2 years. Maybe it was last year. It was 2019. I was down there for a board meeting for Culture City, which is an autism organization that me and my wife work with. And we were at the Phillips, I think it's called Phillips. Yeah, Phillips Arena. Yeah. And we were just walking around, and I'm in the arena, because we were there with the Atlanta Hawks folks, and Dominique Wilkins was hanging out with us. And I hear pounding, dribbling, bounding. And I'm like, who the heck is on the court? And this is all season. I'm like, who the heck is in the court? And it was Vince Carter. He was just down there putting up shots, just putting up shots. That dude played forever, because he never stopped working, ever. And it was cool to see him, because I remember a guy I went to school with at UVA. His name was Walt Deary. He was a tight end. He was a good basketball player at Northside. I think it was Northside High School. So he played football and basketball, but he was a really good high school basketball player. Had won, I think, state record or close to the state record in rebounds. And he said he was playing in this tournament. And on the other team was Vince Carter, and Vince Carter was hanging around the perimeter, and Walt's like, all right, he's not getting the ball, so he's just kind of paying attention to the point guard, and then the point guard starts running at him, and he just throws up this wild hook shot, and Walt's like, where the hell is that going? And here comes Vince Carter, just flying, just smashes it in his face. Dude, Vince Carter he's one of my favorite players ever to watch play the game. Because, I mean, obviously he was at North Carolina when I was at Virginia. But that dude, he's a legend, man. He is an absolute legend.
But what I meant to say is not just like you. You didn't play for 22 years. He transitioned to media just like you.
That's right. Yeah. No, I mean, look, Vince is you when you have a personality and you have the ability to communicate, media calls you, man, and you learn this through your years as a player. You're asked to get in front of people, you're asked to meet certain people, and for me, and I'm sure it's the same for Vince, because I was in a lot of different environments where I met a lot of different people, from players to executives to other people in the media. Like, the transition was easier for me because I had perspectives from all angles of it. And I think Vince is the same way. Like when you understand what an owner thought process is, relative to a player's thought process, relative to the media that's covering all of that, it allows you to have this perspective. Like, you can see it from a higher level. And so when you start getting asked questions, well, what the hell is going on with XYZ team? It's like you have so many angles that you can attack it from. It's media. It just calls you, and I think he's going to be great at it, obviously.
When I look at the running back position in the NFL, I feel like a lot of people pay attention to the wide receiver position and the quarterback. Yep. Those are the positions. But when I look at the running back position, a couple things come to mind. For me, having grown up in both northern New Jersey and New York City and going to college in the Philadelphia area, I remember watching you and then watching Brian Westbrook taking the position.
Brian Westbrook, hell yeah. And then Shady came in. I mean, there's been some good backs in New York. I mean, don't forget Ahmad Bradshaw when he was here, and Brandon Jacobs. I mean, we had some good running backs back in the day in this Philly, New York corridor here.
Here's my question. When you look at the running back position, A, do you think that Westbrook was ahead of his time? And B,
definitely.
Do you think that's what the running back position looks like now?
Absolutely. And there's one exception, and I'll get to it in a second. Brian Westbrook was a guy, I mean, I love the dude, but I hated playing against him because he was impossible to stop. Right? No matter what you ask him, it was similar to things that I was asked to do, but it was even more so as a wide receiver for him. And, we're going to screen you to death in Philly. At least back then, this was the Andy Reid Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to screen you to death. We're going to come up with, cross screens. We're going to come, set this way, but we're screening out the backside. Like he was all over, and he could do it all, right? But he can also stand in the backfield and dot and I and run between the tackles, right? I think that's what the position wants to be, and I think it's teams are trying to find that guy who can do it all, and there's not a ton of them. Christian McCaffrey obviously fits the mold, but he's been banged up this whole season. Who knows if he gets healthy after they paid him $16 million a year. Le'Veon Bell was that guy, but he got contentious with the Steelers and forced his way out. And then he lost some years with the Jets, and now he's back with the Kansas City Chiefs. But I don't want to say he's past his prime, but he's not in that growth window anymore. But I do think that NFL teams are looking for that specific player, and they'll draft them in the first round if they find them. That's why Saquon Barkley got drafted that high. That's why Dalvin Cook for the Minnesota Vikings got drafted that high. That's why Cam Akers, who was hurt in the early part of the season, is now coming on for the LA Rams, because you need that home run hitter who can also be a tough between the tackles runner. And it's not always the 6'2", 220, 35 pounder. Which brings me to my one exception. This frustrates me more than anything in football, Scoop. The MVP race has become a quarterback race. It's all about which quarterback has the greatest stats. Is it Aaron Rodgers with the greatest stats? Is it who else could it be this year? Is it Pat Mahomes with the greatest stats? Was it Tom Brady? Back in 2017, and this frustrated me. In 2017, Todd Gurley had one of the great running back seasons in the last 2 decades. And they couldn't give him the MVP because they had to give it to Tom Brady because he threw for 50 touchdowns on the best team, the dynasty of the last two decades. Instead, they made Todd Gurley the offensive MVP, offensive offensive player of the year, and they gave Tom Brady the MVP this year. And there is no question that Derrick Henry, who is the one exception to the rule that I was talking about, because he is 6'3", 225, 30 pounds, and a bruiser. But he's already rushed for 1,500 yards. He's got 3 games, and if he rushes for 190 or so yards these last 3 games, he's going to pass Eric Dickerson for the all-time rushing record in National Football League history. And if you take Derrick Henry off the Tennessee Titans, they are a below 500 team. Like, he is the most valuable player in football, especially to the Tennessee Titans in the way that they play football. And whether it's, pounding you in submission or getting into a 4-minute offense, we got to run out the clock and he goes 60 yards and hits his head on the goalpost, Derrick Henry is the man. He's the best running back in football right now. And nobody's talking about him being an MVP. Nobody's talking about him being the best running back in football. And it frustrates me because when you have that guy and Derrick Henry is that dude, you better appreciate him because you don't come along that often.
This sounds like the NFL version of whether or not Giannis or LeBron were the MVP last year.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because if you take LeBron James off the LA Lakers, they might win 30 games. Maybe. And I know you got AD there. AD's a superstar. They might win 30 games. And the way he reinvented himself, talking about LeBron now in the Lakers, the way he reinvented himself to being, part Magic, part Kobe, to be honest with you, and winning a championship was, he's been in the league for 17 years, Scoop. 17. Mm-hmm. and he's playing like that. Come on. I would be walking if I was playing 17 years or 16 at that point.
Tiki, while I have you on the line, James Harden. If Nas wrote the song "If I Ruled the World," if you ruled the world for the day, do you like him in Milwaukee? Do you like him in Brooklyn? Do you like him in Miami? Or do you like him staying in Houston?
Mm-hmm. I bring all my sons. I love them, baby.
Yes,
Black diamonds and pearls. Could it be you were just mine? You know what? I would love to see him in Milwaukee. I would love that. It feels like it's getting really toxic in Houston, and it's almost like he's taking on this apathetic view, like, yeah, whatever. You've never seen him like that. Like, okay, I'm just here. I'm just doing. So I think a change of scenery is necessary. And I got pushed back from BT, my co-host, about Milwaukee. But the reason I like Milwaukee is because Coach Budenholzer plays a system that is very similar to what he did in Houston, except defensively, it's more pack line. It's like, all right, if you don't have to play man and defend like vigorously, so you're wearing out your energy and not being able to use it offensively. It's if you're gonna beat us shooting 3-pointers, then go ahead, beat us shooting 3-pointers. But we're gonna beat you by also shooting 3-pointers and having the best Greek freak, offensive unstoppable player in the post that we can have. So if you have a combo of James Harden and Giannis, now you probably have to give up Chris Middleton and probably Drew Holiday as well. So it would be you probably gut your team to make that trade happen. But in theory, James Harden in a system that's somewhat familiar to what he likes to do offensively, and I think it's good enough for him defensively. I think will make the most. I would love to see him in Milwaukee in a small market. And you know what? They'd be a favorite to win the championship. There wouldn't be a doubt about it.
And no Philly.
I don't see Philly, man, because I don't love their construction right now. The construction of the 76ers. Like last year, it was intriguing to me when they got big. Right? They bring in Al Horford. They have Ben Simmons is a 6'10" point guard, right? And Joel Embiid is 7'1", and then Tobias Harris. It's like they were massive. They were like trees. But it was all. But when it came down to it, it's like, yeah, but who plays basketball like that anymore? You know what I mean? Like we playing inside out all of a sudden. Like what the hell's going on? So I think there's just too much work to be done down there. Now Daryl Morey is there, so I believe he's going to get really creative and start tinkering with Philly. Philly, I think, has a real shot in a couple of years. But I don't like it for James Harden right now at 31 years old. You got to be somewhere that's set up to win him a championship. Now it becomes a super team, which is odd if he goes to Milwaukee. That is, it becomes a super team because I think Giannis wasn't. That's not his deal. But it would be fun. It'd be really fun if he was in Milwaukee.
Well, you didn't mention Brooklyn, so.
Oh, dude, talk about egos. I mean, the only reason it would be smart in Brooklyn is because Joe Tsai, who is the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, is that he looks at the sport as also a marketing tool and a sales tool. And when you look at top 10 jersey sales, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, James Harden, I mean, you're raking in cash. Yep. If he ends up going there, that would make sense from a business standpoint. It'd be interesting to see how they all mesh. Not enough shots. There was not enough shots for James Harden to be in Brooklyn.
Well, here's the good news, sir, Mr. Knight Rider. You're off the hot seat.
I appreciate you, brother. It wasn't that hot. It was like a little warm, a little toasty, comfy for the snowy day up here in the Northeast.
That's okay with a minute.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you for your time.
Always, brother. Be good, man. Be blessed, and see you soon.
Yes, sir.